Hey everyone, and welcome to this new video. In this video, I finally want to introduce you to the first Thread products. More after the intro. Enjoy! Yes, they have been here for a long time, but I haven't had the chance to unpack them properly or present them to you yet. But Eve has agreed to send me their Thread products so that I can take a look at them together with you. First of all, the exciting thing about Thread. It is based on Bluetooth and is natively compatible with most smart hubs. This means that, unlike Zigbee, you do not need some kind of station to connect everything like Home Assistant or something similar, but instead have native Thread support in the current HomePod and, as far as I know, also in the Google Home Hub. However, I'm not entirely sure about that. This means that theoretically, if you don't need extensive automations, you could completely skip Home Assistant if you were to start with Thread. But, and now it gets even cooler, unlike Zigbee, you are not limited to a single connector. Instead, you can theoretically get 5 HomePods that can all connect directly to your Thread devices. This means that if a HomePod is unplugged, has no network or something like that, the remaining HomePods take over the communication, ensuring that you always have an accessible smart home. That's exactly why, and because it becomes even more exciting in connection with Meta, I am very curious to install it at my place and simply test how well it works. But I would say, let's take a quick look at what they have sent me here. Here we have the Eve door and window sensor, and to test it thoroughly, I have 6 of them so I can install them directly on all the windows. This way, in winter, my automation can turn off the heating when I open a window, allowing me to run everything completely over Thread. I also have the Eve light strip here, an LED strip that works natively with HomeKit. And finally, I am very excited about the Eve light switch, which I find to be a relatively stylish light switch that also has Thread support and could potentially become my new light switch. Because, and I always have to mention this when it comes to the topic of Zigbee, light switches are a bit of a weak point for me, as I often have the problem that a light switch doesn't work again and the apartment is left in the dark. Most of the time I can still establish the connection through Home Assistant or Apple Home, which means I can turn the lights on and off, but for some reason the Eve light switch is not being recognized again. I might have one of the first generations of the IKEA light switches and they may not work as smoothly yet. The batteries run out relatively quickly, but it feels like I have to change them every 2 months, and that is really annoying. With this Thread light switch, I hope for some improvement at least, and I am curious about how good the battery life is and of course how the connectivity performs. So, if the HomePod or Home Assistant fails now, will my control still work or will there be any problems? And since I haven't really dealt with Thread on this channel at all, I want to show you the setup of the whole thing right away. I would like to try it out in both Home Assistant and HomeKit, and it is supposed to be theoretically super easy. So I would say, let's just try it out with the Eve door and window sensor and see how it works. Now I'll just unpack the sensor here, install the battery in the back, and then it should be ready to go. A red light briefly lit up here in the front, and on the side there is a HomeKit QR code that I can't show you right now because it is of course responsible for connecting this device. As a primary HomeKit user, I can now implement everything super easily by going into the Home app and, just like I did with the Philips Hue Hub or the IKEA Hub, simply clicking on Add Accessory at the top. The camera opens, I scan the code once, and then the sensor is already displayed here, and I can add it directly to Apple Home. The setup behaves relatively similarly in Home Assistant as well. I go into the Home Assistant app, click on Settings, Devices and Services, and I can already see if everything has gone correctly, the Eve door sensor in my discovered devices. I can configure it here now, and when the configuration assistant is started, since I can't scan a QR code here, I need to manually enter the pairing code that is found on the QR code. After some time needed for the connection, I have already connected the sensor and can now simply test everything manually here. I can see that when the LED in the front lights up, it indicates that it has either been opened or closed, and I can directly verify this status in Home Assistant. I have now simply opened the device here. Currently the sensor is obviously set to open, and when I close it now, as soon as the LED lights up, it should switch to closed. And when I pull it away again, the sensor should immediately switch back to open. I have to say, after some testing, I am really very impressed, especially with the reliability of the connection, and I truly find Thread to be a worthy successor to Zigbee. I hope that in the future, smart homes will become significantly more reliable wirelessly than they were before. One thing still needs to be noted. Because the devices are A, relatively new, and B, require certification, this standard is still somewhat more expensive. I hope that everything settles down a bit. as it would really be the perfect successor and should ensure that we only have Thread devices in the future. That concludes this very short video. I would like to thank Eve for providing the devices. I will test them thoroughly now, and if you're interested, I can give you an update video on it later. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you would like to see that. Otherwise, I would say we will see each other again next week with hopefully the 100th smart home, which I promised you last week but haven't quite finished yet, as there might be a little surprise coming your way. 2001, so stay tuned, and if you don't want to miss anything, feel free to click subscribe. Until next week, take care and goodbye. You send.